Hello, Mr. Lombardi. Nice to meet you again.
Nice to see you again. About how's things going?
It's going pretty good.
Yeah.
Very happy to meet you again to discuss more about the company.
Yeah.
And yeah, so should we get started?
Yeah. Of course, I'm excited. Since I put on my business for sale, I've been receiving so many contacts from the financial institute, and it seems that many people are interested. And I do like your firm, so that's why I give your firm my priority. And I
Okay.
really hope that we work things out together.
Okay. Yep. So we are equally excited in the firm. We see a lot of goodness in terms of products. In terms of products, we
Yeah.
do see that a lot of these competitors are coming in, but we still see that your company has very
Great.
strong
Great.
products. And finally, I also want to thank you around being so open, giving us access to the information of the financials.
Yeah.
I think that was really nice of you. So
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
yes, we can now start looking at how we want to, like, what would be the right way of getting this deal forward.
Yeah, I'm glad. I appreciate the very straightforward and transparent financial statement. Did you get a chance to look at the one that I sent you?
Yes, I have some information with me in terms of what does um, the the revenues look like
Yeah.
so far, and I don't know if we are having the same thing. All right. Anyway, so based on that, the only thing which which if you are talking purely in terms of finance,
Mhm.
the so before we get into actually the finances, I
Yeah.
wanted to know what are the things which are really important to you when you're thinking about selling off the firm, like
Yeah.
what things matter to you. So is it in terms of, okay, so one of the motivations of why you're selling is just in terms of monetary benefits, or is it something else?
So the reason behind myself selling my own company is that I am getting old, and
Okay.
unfortunately, it's just a rule of nature. I want to spend more time with my family. As you know, the distribution and sales and marketing sales force, what I've been doing, it's expanding, and it requires me a lot of trouble. And I feel like the company is like my baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to let it go and then let it grow to a larger scale. I'm afraid that it's too, I, I'm getting too old to handle everything myself.
Okay. Okay, all right. That sounds. I mean, it's. I would say that it's commendable that you have grown the company so far so well, and definitely want to continue on the legacy. But g- given the current state of the company, there are going to be some transformations which happens if we end up buying the company. Do you think, like, so? How do you see currently? The company has what we look at is like two things: the products which you have, and then you have like entire management, and plus you have this distribution plan which you talked about.
Yeah.
So how do you think are these things playing out in these three things? So do you see how do you see is the management in your view?
So so something I see as of great value is our distribution channel.
Okay, okay,
So I have received a lot of I was approached by a lot of company and asking whether they want to do a collaboration because our very deeply penetrated distribution channel in the region, and I was even approached considering setting up a subsidiary just for the distribution channel and make it a standalone company. However, from my previous consideration, I don't want to overgrow it. I want to take it slow and let it grow organically.
okay,
But I do see many people value my distribution channel. And second, I think our brand is highly reputable in this region,
okay.
and um, I can be very honest with you. I was approached earlier with a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
It's offering 8 million dollars just for my brand.
Okay,
So I can see it's a very um, clear or on a table benchmark that I could think of, like how people value my brand. So
okay,
I'm glad.
okay.
And then also my sales and marketing team,
Mm-hmm.
they are like my right and left hands.
Okay,
They really help us to build great client relationship in terms of this. This market is very scattered, fragmented.
mm-hmm.
I'm sure this very deeply localized network sales and
Mm-hmm.
marketing team will help, will bring not just us, but also bring some benefit to the other company that's under your management.
Okay, so yes, we do see different aspects of the business which would bring value to us. Coming to your point about brand, we do also have some information on that. So just wanted to let you know that for us, once we have the company, we have all the products are going to be as part of the parent company. So for us, the products are is going to be what is important, and we would like to give it a new look in terms of modernizing and making it more tech specific. So that's what we are thinking, because it goes to our long term strategy.
Yeah.
So for us, brand, like the minute we buy you and we take off, suppose we are not using that brand name, so for us the brand doesn't really hold in that sense. But yes, given that somebody else is uh, ready to get that brand, we can definitely talk about, okay, what would be like a price to be considered for the brand. But I do
Sure.
want you to know that for us, the minute we buy, it goes under our parent brand. So we are not planning to sell as part of the existing Lombardi brand.
Yeah, sure.
So just wanted to keep that in context.
Okay.
And now, so I think, do you think it's a good time to start going into details of the valuation?
Let's do that.
Okay. So starting with the first thing, which was WAC, which you suggested that we should be using Lombardi's WAC method to do all the valuations. And I think, all right, what the team has decided is yes, we would also go for a WAC. But then what we were thinking is the current company's WAC is 9.67%, if I'm not wrong, and a market rate is about 9.2%. And for us, when we are getting into any buyouts, we have to consider a risk premium, because it's a new market for us, new space for us, so we would have a risk premium. Usually we take a 5% risk premium for any company.
5%.
Yeah, that's the usual thing.
Yeah.
But because you have been so generous in terms of showing us all your financials, which I would say has reduced the risk for our team, and we are willing to bring it down to about like 2%.
Okay, so why do you think you will need to add 5% to the WAC that we are currently using?
So usually we would have a 5% whenever we are entering a new market, new product, because there are a lot of things which are associated just while buying something. So as a standalone, when you are running a business, you have a WAC, but the minute we are getting into and buying it, there are a lot of things we have to assimilate to ensure that the business continues the way it is and it aligns with it. So we have some risks associated just by virtue of getting into buying this business.
Okay, so let me understand. So you're saying if I sell my company to you, and my company will be at a higher risk, is that?
So for us, it's a risky proposal because it's going to be in a new market.
Yeah, but however, the management from on my end will still be taking the lead in doing the business, right?
So they would, yes, again, so that's a different topic of discussion based on what would be the state of the organization. Does it require some changes? Does it not require some changes? Does it require some flow of good management people here and there? I think that's a different point of discussion, and we'll come to that. But what I'm talking about is in terms of risk. There is certain way in which you are assessing a business. For us, we would have done it probably in different ways of valuation. But WAC seems like a good option, and we agree to your point. And all I'm saying is we would take it, we would have some sort of risk premium when we are going into buying this.
So you're suggesting.
So what I'm saying is not 5% increment, but about less than 2%, which would bring it to a total of about 11%. So it's 1.3%.
11%.
Yeah.
That's a surprise. Because usually, as you already know, industry average is 9.2, and we're already offering a higher WAC than that. Okay, I didn't realize you see it as a more risky act. That comes as a surprise. Okay. So what will you say is your the free cash net MPV of your DCF?
So that uh, so based on the
Yeah.
11% VAT,
Yeah.
it comes out to about 21 million. And I think why, let me explain that number a
Yeah.
bit. So there is one factor which is growth here.
Mm.
In terms of growth, what I have done is averaged out the revenues for the last 5 years, because there has been a lot of fluctuations in revenue terms. There has been constant increase in costs, but the revenues have fluctuated. So I have averaged out both,
Okay.
and taken up a average growth of revenue of about 0.4%, continued for the next 10 years.
But then the past fluctuations due to the macro level factors, not because us. So
Okay, so when you say the past fluctuations, are you talking about a specific year when you are seeing this fluctuation?
So, for example, we see a dip in year -4.
Okay,
I believe that could link to the financial crisis.
okay, all right. Okay, if we consider that point, that particular dip was as part of financial crisis, but when we are averaging out in for the last 5 years, it kinds of accommodates that particular dip, because we are averaging it out over 5 years.
Okay, and the cost. What did you mention something? With
So
the
what I was
cost
saying
as
is the cost has been constantly on the move up. If you see, and that's why we are thinking that the growth rate in terms of cost will be about 1.2%, and in terms of revenues, it's going to be around 0.4%.
well? Okay. Hmm, wow, that's half. That's just below 50% of the what I proposed to you. So, which is really a low offer from you.
So when you say half of what you proposed is, could you be like,
Yeah.
so what's
So
the
I
number
believe
which
the number I send you from DCF, it will be 45.72.
45.72? Okay, okay, and that is based out of so
Yeah.
so let me clarify. I did not have the actual number of 45.72 which you gave me. I had that the factors which you were telling me.
Okay. So the factor, consider WAC, like you already know, I use the current WAC. However, given the last year performance, I projected the growth to be 2.4.
2.4%. Okay.
In the
Next 10
next
years.
10 years.
Okay. So let's talk about that particular growth. So that growth has only happened in last year, where it is after that last year's growth, it has actually reached a revenue which was 5 years back, right? So do you think it's a like valid, even like taking one particular year's growth? If in the same way we look at suppose year 5 and we see year 4, and we take suppose that number, then
Yeah, so I believe this fluctuation is understandable in this emerging markets. That's why we also have a higher than industry WACC to reflect this the fluctuation of my company.
okay.
So I think it's fair to adjust, maybe to fine tune maybe the revenue or the WACC, but I do not think it's justifiable to adjust both WACC and revenue, because I mean WACC, it's reflecting the risk that's involved, right?
So let me just give you. So I am saying these two things are different for me. Is when I'm calculating WACC, a WACC percentage in my DCF would have that growth as a different factor. So growth is separate from WACC. WACC is just representing the risk.
But you were talking about the risk of the fluctuation, right?
So I'm talking about not the risk of the fluctuation. I'm talking about whether the growth number, what does it represent? What is the true value for growth?
Okay, then why do you average the growth rate to forecast the future?
Because in the past, if I see, if I see year three to year two, there is like a 0.5% fall. If you see from, I'm not even considering year four, but if I'm seeing year two, three to year two, there has been a slight fall. So what I'm saying is, the average is just giving me a better picture of what the revenue looks like, a future revenue would look like.
I don't know about that. The future, well, the macro condition in the future may not be the same as the past, right? And I believe this region will have a pretty rosy decade ahead. So
Could you please repeat?
I believe the region will have a pretty promising future in the next decade.
Okay.
And I will not feel very comfortable to compromise the revenue growth rate as just what you propose.
Okay. Um, I do understand, like, you feeling anxious about it's probably going to grow, but then could we come to a point where, like, I am also able to understand the rationale of how we are, like, so that if I am justifying it to my leadership, then I have certain strong rationale.
Yeah.
Because I'll try to put my rationale in front of you. Like, what I'm doing, any calculation is doing, when I'm doing a DCF, I'm just keeping all the cash flows, taking a whack, and removing the growth from it.
Yeah.
And hence, I was saying that these two things are different.
So what we did last year is that we did a reorganization. So we have seen the fluctuation, like you observe as well in the last 5 to 3 years. So we have a huge meeting, and the takeaway from the meeting is that we did some organization and have a better forecast in the electronic markets.
Okay.
Given the forecast and the work that we've done, we expect the growth rate to be 6 to 8% in this electronic markets, and also in our leading position in the markets. So nonetheless, I agree with the uncertainty since it's a new change. So I lowered the expectation down to 2.4%. That's how I end up with the revenue. So I also discounted our forecast to a lower number.
So when you say you lowered the number, but then how did you arrive at that 2.4%?
So previously, it's also our forecast after the reorganization and with the forecast in the electronic markets, which we believe is ready to take off in a larger scale.
Okay.
The forecast in the market will be
Okay.
6 to 8%
Okay.
per industry.
Okay. And when you came up with the 2.4 number, it was because it would be half of that, or something?
Yeah, because I guess the investment banker is more conservative, and they also talk about risk, so I just willing to lower the rates on my end first as a goodwill gesture. Otherwise, I will forecast it as a 6 to 8%, but I'm willing to lower it to 2.4%.
Okay. So, all right. So I understand at least your rationale behind that.
Yeah.
And what I'll try to put my rationale again so that you are there with me. So my rationale is just I've taken all the revenues in the past, and there have been fluctuations where they've been low, it has been flat, and I've averaged out, and I'm getting a 0.4%.
Yeah.
And that's what we are thinking would be for the next 10
totally
years.
understood. However, as you know, we've been through a big organizational change.
Okay.
So you cannot compare apple to orange. So
Okay.
right now we're new. We're different.
Okay. So at one point in time you had brought up that either it has to be a WAC sort of discussion or a growth discussion, and we have to choose one of those. So I'll want to go back to your point when you brought this up, that we have to, if we are going with a 0.4% growth, then we cannot have 11% back. So you mentioned that sometime back.
Yeah, because you also mentioned due to a fluctuation in the past, it would make more sense to use an average. So I sense that you're pointing to the risk in the fluctuation there.
Okay.
So I think the risk will probably factor into the WAC.
Okay.
So that's why I set those.
Okay. So I'll just try to clarify.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about 11%, the kind of thing, as per my company, whenever they're going into buying something, 5% is what they always take on the market rate. So it would ideally, for the company, it would be 14.2%. 11% is what I have come up with a number based on all the information you have provided, because it substantially reduces the risk. So from 5%, it's actually 1.3%. So I just wanted you to know that, like, fact from my angle, that it's from 5 to 1.3%. And it's fine that if it seems that this is a number which is going high, we could talk about it more. And then, but I still want to say that the growth aspect, it is difficult for me to even like justify that growth.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, sure, because you are outsider. Probably I have a better understanding in terms of
Okay.
the forecast.
Okay.
But I am being very conservative and very humble in terms of my business value, because I didn't even include the biggest chunk usually in evaluation, which is the terminal value.
Okay.
I only include up until the year
Okay.
10.
Okay.
So if you considered the missing part of the terminal value, I really think I'm offering a very modest valuation here
Okay.
on the table.
Okay. So do you think that if we bring down the WACC to what you had suggested of about, suppose, 9.67%, and for this, let me tell you, I have to deal separately with my manager. I have not had that discussion, but given that I want to make sure that we are coming up with something which where your motivations don't change, and I have the same kind of motivation. I'm thinking having a 9.67% on WACC, does that seem like something, and when we maintain the same level of growth which I have here, because that is something which I can justify with numbers.
So you mentioned your growth is 1.2?
0.4%.
0.4.
Yeah, for the revenue, and 1.2% for the 1.2% for the cost.
Oh man, so you're saying at one point the cost will potentially exceed the revenue?
No, it won't exceed the revenue. The total cost is less, but the growth of the cost has been constant.
But
So
then
just
if the
averaging,
revenue is growing slower than the cost, wouldn't it at one point the cost exceed the revenue?
it could happen such a way if the revenues are not high. But here in this case, the revenue is always higher, so it would not happen.
Well, if you think long term,
Okay.
at one point, if
Okay.
you were keep using this growth rate like this,
Okay. So, but then that long term is very, very long term. If I'm looking at a horizon of 10 years, which is what we have kept here, even in that case, the revenues are always higher
well,
than
if
the
you
cost.
look at the number, if you're putting a 0.4 and a 1.2, I wouldn't see that long it takes for the cost to be higher than the revenue.
So, I can show you the numbers. So, if it is 0.4%
Yeah.
and to 1.2%, after 10 years, even then the revenue is higher than the cost.
Oh wow. But I mean, for the reorganization, I really don't think the revenue and the cost structure will stay the same like this. So, I mean, I really hope that you can look at the last year and current year comparison, because that's what the big changes happened.
Mm-hmm.
And last year and current year, the revenue grew by almost 3.
Yeah, 3%.
3 million or something, and then
Yeah.
the cost just grew up slightly by 0.2 by the absolute value.
Okay.
So I do think this trend will continue in the future. So I understand that you're looking at the past 5 years. However, last year is really our team and I put a lot of effort in this. I do hope that you will consider that as a value added. So
Absolutely. So I think the whole point of us having this discussion
Yeah.
is that we see value in the company, and that's why we are looking to buy it. Having said that, I still want to ensure that we are using the right rationale when we are going into the actual valuations, and then all the aspects which you're mentioning about, suppose a particular change, then we somewhere factor that into our calculation. Like, okay, you say
Yeah.
that there is this brand thing, which, even though I was telling you our rationale behind something of why when we include it would go away, but still, because it's something which there is a value, we would talk about that. So I'm thinking, like, if you can think of certain, like, okay, there has been a management change, and that would somewhere account for in some picture, and then we can account for that particular change in terms of some value.
So what are you proposing here? So
So
are you
here,
still sticking to the growth rate?
so yes, the whole point of me talking about the growth rate is on the premise that we would reduce the WACC further and bring it to what you were saying about 9.67%, but we keep the growth to 0.4%.
0.4%. How about the cost? I wouldn't say the cost keep increasing in the next 10 years. Maybe
I mean,
you can be conservative in terms of revenue growth, but and especially if I'm selling my company to your company,
okay.
I do hope that there will be some sharing of the management practice and management know-how in terms of reducing the cost. So I wouldn't be comfortable seeing the cost grow that high, considering
Okay.
we're selling to your experienced management team.
Okay.
So yeah.
So all right. So I think what we can do is, I totally like your point. We do have some plans of how we can optimize the costs, and yes, I think let's think of a number where you think that sounds fair enough to you, and then we can make some adjustments here in the cost. So why we had got this number of 1.2% is based on the premise of constant move upwards of the cost, but we can always modify that. So if I do some calculation. Okay. So what we can do is we could bring the cost down to the same as the revenue growth at 0.4%, because if I'm for the cost specifically, if I just look at last year where it moved about 0.2, even though the costs had increased more in the past, but if we only keep last year into context, then we can have about 0.4%. And let's say the change you made last year, that's the kind of thing which will continue, and then it would have 0.4%.
Okay, so you're saying we just look at the EBITDA considering EBITDA growth then, because you were treating the growth rate for the revenue and the cost the same.
Growth rate, revenue cost, yes,
Right.
pretty much the same, yes.
So
Excuse me.
okay, well, since I am forecasting the industry growth at 6.8 to 6 to 8%, well, it's kind of a surprise to me. So do you see? Okay, so in this case, I will have to bring the terminal value back to the picture then.
But so
Yeah.
before we move on to this, so I think what I thought we are agreeing upon is we are making these changes, like I'm reducing that and the cost on the premise that this seems like something which we could agree upon. Like when you mentioned the WACC is low, WACC is quite high. The whole rationale for bringing that down was the growth rate would remain 0.4%. And then what you talked about the cost, it seems high. The whole point of bringing it down upon 0.4 was we could agree upon the final WACC and this growth. And those all things are based on the premise that what we already had in the deal remains constant.
Yeah. So based on the three factors that we talk about, WACC and revenue growth and cost growth.
Yes. So if to make things very simple, what I'm saying is cost. So WACC, but initially before we started the meeting, this was what was our take. Revenue was 0.4. This was 1.2. While talking, okay, this is what you're suggesting, and we're fine with this, and this. So this is what I'm saying. Like we could move it back to what you were saying, and this is what we'll reduce to what you're saying. So now does it seem like something you're comfortable with?
How about we move the cost and revenue both up to 2.4?
I don't think we'll be able to do that because there is no justification for us to do that.
But then you are suggesting the cost could increase at a rate of 2.4.
So I just brought it down.
Then why do you bring the cost down?
Doesn't?
Why do you bring the revenue down instead of raising the cost?
So I had already raised the cost when you suggested that okay there
Yes,
will be
yes, yes, I understand. So for why do you bring the growth rate of the revenue down instead of raising the growth rate of the cost?
so why I'm suggesting this is because this is has been so how I'm saying is what you do in terms of cost is an operational efficiency, which is what you tied it back to a management change, right? And what revenue reflects is actually the product selling outside.
But the
So-
product, but the industry is very rosy. Our product can definitely sell, and the industry demand is rising.
So the thing is, if we start talking about industry, so if you're moving towards looking at industry demand, even though the products are good, there are other certain challenges. There are a lot of competitors, as you might know, that they're entering into the market. So I would not go into the direction of trying to speculate which one will eat what share, and try to tie it back to okay, where are the changes which really drive our revenue and cost factors. For revenue, why I am choosing to keep this at this level is because the numbers are showing us from the past till today. In terms of cost, I would have kept this to the historical way of movement, but I'm agreeing to your point that there has been a change,
Yeah.
and internal changes can be reflected on costs.
So, may I ask, have your team did any industry analysis in terms of the future growth? of
So
the industry?
right now, I don't have the data point with
Yeah.
me. I'll have to check with them.
So
that okay.
how about maybe if we have a next meeting, then we could maybe agree on this thing, because I mean all the news and all the report is just showing that the future is very, very promising, and I don't think the 2.4% can justify the future growth. I mean, I'm more comfortable with you increasing the cost growth rate because I can see a cost increase uh, going along the line with the more products sold. But however, I believe the company is I want to have your firm to grow the company instead of just cutting the cost. Cutting the cost, I can just bring any experienced management team in to optimize the operation. But my vision is the growth. So if
Okay.
you are just looking at optimizing the internal operation, I think maybe we have different interests.
So I'm getting confused. So initially you mentioned that, so you started with saying revenue should be, if it's brought down, which I should reduce the WAC, and I was there with you, I reduced WAC. Then you said your team would come and reduce cost, and I said okay, we'll reduce cost. And now
Yes.
you're saying we should increase cost. So I'm a little confused of what do you want us to do?
So I want to I want us to be on the same page in terms of where the future is.
Okay.
So I think the future is the industry, high demand from the industry, and I want the company to be acquired by someone who helped to build a company,
Okay.
to grow a company.
Right. Exactly.
So I understand there will be paying while we grow,
Okay.
which could potentially come in the cost side, and also could potentially be due to the cost of goods sold increase.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. However, given your the forecast, 0.4% of the growth is like nothing. It's like the industry stays status quo.
Okay.
I really don't think that's the right
So
picture.
all right. So I get your point. So what you're saying is, as we are growing, there should be some way of reflection of that particular point.
Exactly.
And what
Yeah.
I'm saying is, probably the way we would be growing is coming back to what you were saying, is that you have a strong distribution channel, and we might end up selling more of our products. So then the point would be that how do we factor in? And when we are talking about this revenue, it's your products, and what we see is your products might remain constant, but then in general the company might grow. So now what we could do is we could factor in that particular point of,
Okay.
now that you are going to be part of our company, that synergy, is there a factor of bringing in that value of
Okay.
the synergy?
I understood. So since we kind of, I think we understand each other's right now in terms of WAC and growth of the revenue and cost. But I do also think we reach a plateau that we have different opinion in terms of the how the benefit coming in. So if you want, we could move on to the distribution synergy that created.
All right, so we can move on to the distribution
Yeah.
synergy, and that's based on the premise that we are having same goals. That's what I want to
The
clarify.
same goal is I do want to have given the rec, reduce of the rec, but I do want to have the same growth rate for revenue and costs. That's my compromise. Yeah.
So hang
Instead
on. So
of
let me.
both growing at the 0.4%, I want both grow at the 2.4%.
So if that's the case, then I mean, then we're not really changing anything. So what you're saying is you want the VAT
No,
to
we
be.
changed. We changed. Previously, the cost on my proposal is 0.1%.
So the thing is, what you're having on your proposal is something on your end, but the way I was making changes was based on your inputs, and then you reversed back to, okay, we need to make some changes in terms of revenue and cost, and then the whole point of me bringing in the synergy was to factor in your long-term goal, which we would like to share. That's based on the premise that we are agreeing to these numbers. So then,
So you are not willing to change the 0.4%?
no. So what I'm saying is we agree to this particular number and then move on to synergies where we can factor in the growth of the bigger company. When there is absorption of your company into this big company, and how we can factor in that number.
So are you still sticking to the 0.4%?
Yeah. So I'm talking about this 0.4% as is.
So you're saying there will be no growth in terms of selling my product, but all the synergy goes to your end.
So what I'm trying to say is I cannot really make a statement of what that would be.
But I'm just looking at the sales of my product. There's nothing to do with your product yet.
Okay.
So not yet to the synergy part. I'm just looking at the forecast of the company, my company right now.
Okay.
So you're saying there will be pretty much no growth in the next 10 years.
So actually, I'm not saying. I'm looking at your numbers. Your numbers are telling me that it's at this particular rate. So I'm not making any comment out of my own that your products are not selling. I'm just saying I'm looking at your numbers, your management, your balance sheet, and those numbers are telling me that it's going to be at 0.4%. And I'm in fact agreeing to your point that even though your numbers are telling me it's at 1.2%, but then if it's going to, you made some changes, and I'm trying to accommodate those in terms of numbers.
Okay, so just maybe go back to the point I made earlier, and about I hope that your team could look into the industry analysis part and see what other people talk about industry in the next 10 years.
Okay.
I'm not myself is not convincing enough to talk you into have a positive forecast in the future, but from my research result, I do think people are very positive in the future.
Okay.
So.
And how much does it change? So suppose in your terms, when you were keeping this revenue at 2%, so how much does it change in terms of the total in 10 years? Like
the number, the DCF?
Yeah. Not just the DCF, just the revenue part. Because the DCF would also factor in the cost. So
you want to see what number?
So I'm talking about just the revenue part. Did you get any idea?
So the year 10? Number year 10? Which year?
Yeah, 1 to 10. Yeah.
So from year 1 will be 96.6 and up until year 10 will be 98.9.
98.9?
Yeah.
Okay, in year 10. Okay. All right. And then in terms of cost?
Cost will be your 2.4. I don't have it on my proposal because I use 0.1%. Okay,
suppose in 0.1%, you are saying that it's going to reach somewhere about 91. Like, what is the operating expense that you're seeing?
I'm willing to compromise it as using a 2.4% growth, same growth as the revenue.
Okay.
Which is a 2.3% increase from my proposal.
Okay, so I hear you. What I'm trying to see is that we did see a lot of difference in our DCF valuation.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that we are looking at the right numbers. Like, are we looking at just growth and cost, and are we missing something?
No, I think just based on the dark sale, the sale that was highlighted, that's something we talk about.
Okay, so your DCF summation was totaling to, did you say?
45.72.
Okay.
But then I also make adjustment for the cost growth rate. So we both need to rework the spreadsheets to look at the number.
Okay. All right.
But this, of course, is under the assumption that we both agree with the WACC and growth rate of the revenue and cost. So
Yeah.
far, it seems that you still have some concern on your mind.
Yes, I mean, so far the thing is like I'm willing to bring the WACC down. I'm willing to bring the cost down. If you are saying you're matching our cost, that sounds like a good news. But then growth is something which I'm still uncomfortable with. Like, and
The
I'm
2.4 growth.
yeah, I'm still uncomfortable with, and I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, 2.4 growth is I don't think I can let let loose of this criteria. I think 2.4 is very moderate considering the future is range from 6 to 8% growth. So I guess I cannot make any
Okay.
compromise on this point.
Okay. All right. So I'll at least keep that in context, and
Yeah.
then we can come back to it. All
Okay.
right. Uh, all right. So then the other thing which I thought we should talk about is
Harsh. I need to catch a flight. It's been 45 minutes.